Are you bored living a mediocre life? We were too, and we know how to change that. Each week, we'll leave our comfort zones to explore a new topic, then step onto our soapboxes, a safe space to sound off on our latest adventure. Come explore with us. All opinions are welcome. This is a mindset. This is a lifestyle. This is Siren Soapbox.
Hello, fellow explorers. Welcome to Siren Soapbox. Thank you for diving in and exploring with us. We're on a mission to explore beyond comfort zones because that is where meaningful growth and lasting happiness can be found. We believe that exploration is for everyone. It can take place anywhere, no matter your location or situation. And we made exploring even easier. Check out our pre-dive episode number 114 and the description for links on how to follow along on all of our explorations in February. So many ways to explore. Pick one today and experience life outside of your comfort zone. Back in the summer of 2021, during episode 40, we talked to Mike Rucker about his upcoming book, The Fun Habit. We learned why it's so important to make a habit out of having fun. Making a conscious effort to regularly have fun can lead to some serious physical and psychological benefits. We also dove into the Rucker play model and discovered how much time each of the sirens spent in a week in the pleasing, living, yielding, and agonizing quadrants, and what our fun types were. Recently, Mike's book was published, and we've had the pleasure of reading The Fun Habit. Today, we're going to dive deeper into how fun can be actionable and enjoyable. For an added challenge, Mike had us read more about edge work, which is voluntary risk-taking activities, and soapboxing about what type of edge work you find fun. But first, if at any time the conversation gets too intense, the safe word is
Mango.
Oh, wait, TC's not here.
Girls are ridiculous. First up on her soapbox is Sarah.
Well, I had fun preparing for this episode in a few different ways, starting, of course, with being very excited to have received a copy of Mike Rucker's book and knowing we'd get a chance to chat with him again, but also because I went back and listened to some of our last Fun Habit episode. It was a great episode, as usual, but I really liked hearing again about what I had to say about my fun type, the enthusiast, and how I categorized my activities. I really feel like I was pretty spot on with it, and it all still holds true almost a year and a half later, including my job not bringing me joy, which does beg the question, why am I still there? But anyway, moving on. I've enjoyed reading this book. I did receive a copy of the book, which was very exciting, and also was very exciting to see it on display in the Miami airport. And there I was taking pictures of the book display because I'm a fool. But anyway, I also bought the audiobook because I wanted to be able to listen wherever and whenever. Plus, in this case, it was a little bit like chatting with Mike again as he narrates it himself, which I really did like. I'm not quite finished with it yet, but a lot of that is because I paused to take notes, but I'm usually driving, so I end up rewinding to find out what it was I wanted to jot down. There are so many great concepts that Mike discusses that I paused and rewound a bunch, and I have a bunch of notes scattered around my house, car, and desk at work. So much of what Mike talks about just makes so much sense, like creating a fun file and not making it too long. When he talked about having too many choices for fun, or anything for that matter, I could totally relate. The amount of time our family has spent some evenings trying to decide what movie to watch when we're chilling with dinner at home is comically sad. I've even created a list of movies for just Bill and I to watch to make our evening movie decision easier, and I looked at it just before this episode. There are 36 picks on that list. I guess I need to create a sub-list of the top 8 or something. To the topic of edge work, taking the risk for the fun of it. Interesting that a year and a half ago, I talked about how my living category of activities includes motorcycle riding. And I do believe that that could fall under the category of risky, but exhilarating. And I'm really interested to hear more about that topic here on this episode. Jess, how did you like the book?
I really enjoyed Mike's book. I love learning different methods for maintaining a work-life balance because that's been one of my vision board goals for the last 2 years, as far as self-care. I've gotten better about it, but it's definitely still a work in progress, so anything that helps me with that is awesome. I also really loved the applications of keeping fun in the workplace. I really work hard to keep my job positive and fun for myself, but also because I manage a team and negativity is so contagious. For the challenge of edge work, though, this was actually really hard. I think I'm confused. I couldn't think of anything specific I do besides our weekly episodes. Usually some aspect of our challenges puts me outside of my comfort zone, and most of the time it ends up being fun. I'm not going to talk about the stand-up comedy episode. However, the description of edge work made it sound like it's something that you choose to do because you think it will be fun. Some of our challenges I've done because of FOMO, so I'm not sure if that meets the description. So I'm really excited and curious to have this discussion and also hear how the other Sirens had their take on edge work to try to get some clarification. Elsie, what was it like waiting for this book to come out?
So this was a new experience for me. Never in my life have I waited in excited anticipation for a book to come out. I mean, I guess movies do a better job than books at hyping up their product to get people excited. But this book, man, after our talk with Mike, I could not wait to get my hands on it and learn more. I'm so glad that it came out when it did. It was a great reminder of the things that we learned in episode 40. And this time, I think those lessons are going to be solidified because of learning the science behind why we do some of the things that we do. And because Mike interweaves some fun and memorable stories throughout the book, like the guy that got a wedding invitation by accident and said yes. I've had several times throughout the history of the podcast where I've said this before, and it's the fact that there was a time where I thought I had everything I wanted and couldn't understand why I was not happier. And I felt very connected to the book when Mike describes going through something similar. And the part where it says that you can still have fun when you're going through an unhappy period of your life. That really resonated with me. I have recently taken to heart what Mike said about checking emails all the time and the fact that your brain doesn't know when you're not working. As an entrepreneur, I feel the pressure to be on all the time. And because of the book, I've made a conscious effort to make time for fun with my family. And not just the yielding activities like TV and social media. We've been having fun by playing games and having game nights and walks in the park. And it's really been a breath of fresh air. And also, hello, 80s kid here, terrified of the nothing. And I love the connection of social media being like the nothing that just clicked for me. And when I find myself kind of doom scrolling, I'm like, this is just the nothing. And I put it away now. So, and I also think the podcast needs to have an entire episode on travel hacking and getting around gatekeepers. I hope Mike someday does an entire book on this because this sounds fascinating and I have so many questions. And I was pleased by the section of artifact journaling. I do a travel watercolor journal and I write down fun things that we do and sketch them out. And it's been a lot of fun and made me really happy to go back and look at this journal from time to time. I think I'm an edge work junkie. And I have a feeling that all the Sirens are because we're scuba divers. Other things I like to do for fun, zip lining, kayaking, jet skiing. We do all sorts of stuff for the podcast that I think are fun, motorcycles, fire eating, ghost hunting. And for work, I fly drones. So I might have a problem. Mur, what's your favorite type of edge work?
You did mention scuba diving, and scuba diving is probably my favorite risky activity. But there is another that I don't do as often, so it's probably even more exciting, and that's cliff jumping. So there is a park over here in Indiana that has some different cliffs where you can jump off, and I think I've only done like 25 feet or something. It's nothing major, but it's just into a quarry or whatever, and it makes me scared and excited, and I think that's probably my favorite. So I do love the idea of creating a habit of having fun. And that's what Mike Rucker, he gives us a lot of advice for doing just that in his book. He walks us through different activities like journaling, for example, and their effect on our happiness. I found it especially interesting to learn that a gratitude journal loses its positive benefits when done every day. And then it might be more beneficial to sit down like once a week and jot down things I'm grateful for. I also love the idea of following my kids' lead when it comes to having fun instead of dictating the type of fun we have. It reminded me of a recent adventure that I wanted to share with my kids. I planned a day trip to Columbus to visit Otherworld. Columbus, that's the city I was trying to say, to visit Otherworld, which is sort of a museum of oddities created by just many different artists. And the place was really cool. We got lost in the space for several hours. My nephew went with me, but my daughters refused to make the trip. So maybe it's just because they're teenagers. I don't know. But one thing is for certain, they had zero interest in this activity that I had been planning to do and strategizing to make happen for over a year. So lots of time wasted on an activity that was not even remotely interesting to them. And it did hurt my feelings, but I think the lesson learned was to talk to them about the things they want to do before I put too much effort into planning something that I think that they might be interested in. And I love the chapter on bringing fun to work. Last week, our department had lunch with the CEO, and one person pointed out that while we all sat around and listened to him speak and answer questions, no one really ate lunch. And maybe we viewed it as disrespectful to eat while he spoke. He didn't have time to eat because he was busy talking. Bottom line is that lunch with the CEO wasn't exactly fun. It was good and it was interesting, and I'm glad that we did it. But I wouldn't have categorized it as fun, I guess. So my friend Brian and I, we do organize a monthly movie club meeting, which is completely voluntary. We started that about 15 months ago with just 5 of us showing up to the chat. And last month, I think we had like 12 people in the room and 1 person on the phone for the discussion. So this monthly movie club is something that many of us look forward to as another way to connect with each other. Our guest tonight is the man behind the fun habit, Michael Rucker. According to michaelrucker.com, he is an author, father, husband, organizational psychologist, and behavioral scientist, recovering entrepreneur, fitness enthusiast with mechanical parts, VW bus aficionado, seeker, traveler, and future astronaut. He goes on to say in his website that the tools I had built as a student of positive psychology suddenly failed me during one of my life's most difficult stretches. Finding myself unhappy, a bit lonely, and burnt out, I began to critically evaluate modern approaches to happiness. I quickly realized how much misinformation is out there. Years of research coalesced as the fun habit. The fun habit is an action-based approach that helps you critically examine your pursuit of happiness and make adjustments using evidence-based practices to invite more fun and joy in your life. Sirens, please join me in welcoming Mike Rucker to this episode of Siren Soapbox.
Yay, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm seriously like tearing up. Well, you guys obviously did your homework, and that means a lot, and like resonated with so much that you've all said, each one of you. So, I think, I don't even know where to start, but like, I'll see what you said about, like some of us that are really engaged in heavy pursuit, like how sometimes when you get so caught up in that and maybe become a little too much outcome focused, just kind of exposing that, because you're always told as an author not to read your reviews. And I feel fortunate I've gotten a lot of good ones, but the critical ones sometimes are like, and like some of them are like, this guy had everything. Like, how dare he say, talk about, misery or whatnot. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like maybe you have it figured out. I didn't, and I think a lot of us don't, especially, in this Western ideal of self-worth being so tied to productivity, like, especially as an entrepreneur, right? Like when you're, excuse the phrase, but, when you're kind of in this mode of eat what you kill, sometimes you forget that if you're not enjoying things, one, it can just not be fun, but in the worst case, you can burn out. And so, but each one of you, there were things where I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And like that connection is what it's all about, right?
For sure. So Mike, we're curious, what's your favorite type of edge work?
For me, I think there are 2 things. So as far as physical activity, it's surfing because I have always enjoyed that, but my kids are starting to leapfrog me with regards to skill. And so, as you mentioned, I do have mechanical parts, and so I can't run anymore. That used to be, really my go-to physical activity. But I've had to adapt the way that I pop up on my board because of my hip replacement. And so sometimes it's scary, especially the bigger waves, you know? And so, but I get pushed by the fact, especially my daughter, she's really taken to gymnastics. So she has such a like low center of gravity that, like within 2 summers, she's already better than I've ever been, which is
Wow.
motivating and frustrating at the same time.
That's funny. Good for her.
Yeah, she's crushing it. And my son's good too. He just can't paddle fast enough. He's still he's only 7, so he does require someone to push him into the wave. He'll get there. But my daughter's strong enough to get herself into the waves, which I just think changes the game once you can, because then you can get in so much earlier. And so
Yeah, I've never tried surfing. TC, she's not here tonight. We miss you, TC. Her fiance surprised her with surfing lessons one time on a vacation, and she said it was so exciting. She really enjoyed doing it, but she said it was a lot of work. It was very exhausting.
Yeah, especially it depends on what kind of Sherpa you have. Like if your instructor just pushes you, essentially into the wave, like I think. But if you're, if you have a good instructor that's also trying to teach you how to paddle, well, you guys are all strong swimmers. But yeah, regardless, and it depends. It's exhausting for sure. I mean, I always love the afterglow of any really physical activity, but especially surfing, like just a big, hearty meal after being in the water for so long. Just that there's something about it that always makes the food taste better. But then on the flip, psychological edge work for me is still speaking. Like I've never really been I've always been a slave to my slides, and now I'm giving presentations about the book that are meant to get outside the podium and really not just, sort of academic in nature, but meant to be more motivational. And I really want to be a good steward of that because I'm not Tony Robbins. Those kinds of things I think resonate and certainly work for certain people. But since that's not my flavor, I'm trying to be a good steward of those opportunities, be authentic. And so I put a lot of weight on that performance. And so for me, I lean into that discomfort, but it certainly still presents itself as an immense amount of fear. And so I think that, with regards to the classic definition of edge work still applies.
That's interesting that you say that because, Sarah, I also listened to the book. And as I was listening to you explain it, I immediately went back to the time we did stand-up comedy because it was scary and it was so fun and so rewarding. And I've even gone to some open mics since then, but I have not been brave enough to get back up on stage and tell any jokes. So, but yeah, it's not like a physical, but it is physical. I mean, the reaction is the same, whether I'm jumping off a cliff or going up on the stage to tell jokes,
Yeah, because it's not passive, right? So I think it fits the definition. I mean, in the literature, it's often talked about with extreme sport. And I think that's because when you're in those situations, it's easier because one of the tenets of it, right, is encoding such rich information, because you're so aware of everything, especially if you're in the state of flow. So, there's that sweet spot in between feeling that you're using your skills, but not also exhilarated by the fact that you have to push yourself. That, oftentimes extreme sport is what we talk about. But certainly when you're up there, like stand-up comedy, right, and all eyes are on you, that's very much a physical activity. It's not anything that you could frame as passive. It's just not, right? So, because there's certainly scary things that are passive, right? But that, so again, I think, yeah, stand-up comedy, improv is often brought up, by others. Public speaking, I think all fits the bill with regards to edge work.
It's funny that someone brought up TC and her someone brought up TC and her edge work, previous edge work. She and her fiance have just been on vacation. They're just traveling back, and I think they're just getting back in. And they sent a message. Apparently, TC was jumping off rocks 20 feet into the water. So even though she's not here, she's definitely here in spirit because she's been practicing her edge work while she wasn't here.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear about jumping 25 feet and then just into a quarry. That sounds really dangerous.
I think there's water at the bottom of that quarry.
Oh, okay.
There's water at the bottom of that quarry.
Yeah.
And it's deep
Are you
enough.
in one of those flying squirrel outfits? Or like...
Oh my gosh, that would be insane. No, there's water at the bottom. And it's deep enough that actually divers are diving this quarry while jumpers are jumping into the water. So that's one of my favorite things to do. We usually about once a summer we'll go to some lake and rent a boat and find a place where we can climb up and jump off into the water. I only have to do it like once or twice, then I'm good. But
yeah, that's always been fearful for me too. I think I must be, if I, the body keeps the score, right? I'm sure I belly flopped like at least 3 or 4 times, before teenage years. And so like every time I do something like that, I'm afraid my body's going to go, horizontal to the water.
I always had trouble jumping off the 10-foot diving board at school.
Yeah.
It was like my body just wouldn't let me do it. I'd stand there forever. I'm like, I can do it. It's just right there. It's going to be fine. And I couldn't go.
And then remember that the longer you would stay, like my knees would start to shake, so the board would get wobbly. Oh my gosh. So you just kind of I remember I would just do it because I knew what was coming. If I, as Tina Fey says, right, you can't be that kid that sits on the edge of the water slide. Sometimes you just got to jump. I think that applies to the diving board too.
See, and I am like the opposite, Sarah. I, to this day, cannot go to a pool that has a 10-foot diving board and not jump off of it over and over again. I love it.
But I did jump out of a plane once. I feel like that counts.
It definitely counts.
A perfectly good plane, and I jumped out.
I think I'm going to wait until I'm 50 to do that, because then all my kids will be adults. And
so I
just in case I die.
I did it before I had kids. Now I don't think I could do it.
Yeah. I mean, I basically always had kids, so.
Yeah, I did it back when I was really crazy and silly and was like, nothing to lose. It'll be fine. And my only disappointment was I jumped out, it took me too long to get my other foot out because I did a tandem jump, right? So I was attached to somebody, and the guy that I was attached to, he was trying to get out of the plane, and one of my feet would not come with us because it was not going to let me leave the plane. So the person
still on the diving board.
Yeah, the person taking the video jumped out. And so in the video, I'm about this big, and you can't really see me. This big, for those that can't see, very tiny. And so
picture a Polly Pocket.
One of the points of getting the video was to send it to my mom so that she could have a heart attack watching me jump out of a plane. But seeing as that it wasn't going to work because she couldn't see me, I didn't buy the video.
I was going to say, she's like, what's this speck of something flying through the air that you sent me? I don't understand.
So I had to console myself with just telling her I jumped out of a plane.
So Jess, has edge work been explained a little bit better to you, or are you still confused?
Yeah. It has. I feel like, I don't know why, for some reason, scuba diving didn't even come into my brain. I guess just because I refused to do any of the crazy, insane dives, like, in caves and whatnot. So I don't know why that didn't come in my brain. But I don't know. We do all these challenges, and yeah, most of them end up being fun, but I just don't know if they count because it's not so much that I'm like, it's my idea, I guess, is why in my brain. I don't know if they count because it's not my idea. But
it's really the reason it's called edge work is you're getting up to that edge of fear, right? So to the point where you're not so anxious that it's not enjoyable at all. But similar to how flow gets you up to skill, edge work really gets you up to that feeling of mild discomfort so that you can grow within that space, right? Where it's not traumatic, but at the same time, you're like, okay, I do have, some people enjoy risk. So there's 2 types, right? Like oftentimes what's used is the roller coaster, because most people know that when they get on a roller coaster, it will be thrilling, but the risk is fairly low. But I think with scuba diving, like I remember scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef, what was it? It was, I'm embarrassed that I forget, but it was a fish way bigger than me. It wasn't a shark, but it was, and like I was fearful, like I was at the edge of fear. I knew I was generally safe, but it brought me into that awe and wonder of just seeing something new, and really feeling a connection to the sea, but then also feeling a little bit unsafe, and finding comfort in that. So but I see where you're going with that. Like if it's true recreational, like I'm gonna like boil it down to something even safer, like snorkeling, where you never feel any sort of sense of danger, then that you're right, that wouldn't be edge work, because you're not really at the edge of fear, right? So is that maybe where the ambiguity is?
Yeah, I guess I just was thinking, like, does it have to be something that you choose?
Well,
Or
but
is your idea?
even if it's not your idea, you're still choosing to complete the task. You're still choosing to do the thing. So, in my opinion, I think it counts. Like getting online with that group of people to do that improv, that was scary for you. I think that counts. I don't know if you enjoyed it,
Well, and I
but
think
you
the
did
other
it.
thing too is that some people are afraid to scuba dive,
Yeah.
and that's going to be beyond edge work for them, and that's like, no big deal for you.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on everybody's comfort level, and also maybe how you feel at the end of the edge work. If you had fun, maybe Mike can help me out with that.
No, I think that's right. I think, the idea is, again, where are you in that sweet spot of sort of pushing yourself versus not feeling like it's traumatic? And you're spot on. I mean, I think the fact that you opted into these challenges, like even though the challenges were dictated to you, the fact that you weren't forced into them certainly means that it was voluntary, right? I'm sure you could. I'm not going to say it again because but the word to be unspoken, like, right? You could say that and opt out of it. So it very much wasn't involuntary, right?
I didn't want to say mango again on our show.
Then I would really have this, record to uphold, to being the person that said it twice. I'm sure that's not going to be broken for some time.
Like, man,
speaking of edge work,
coming
right?
back and he keeps using the safe word.
So scared of the sirens. No, but yeah, I mean, I get, I get the ambiguity, but in essence, it's, if you're getting yourself voluntarily, which you are, because you opted into these challenges, even though, and I love the variability of it, right? Like, and to the extent that you're leaning into that discomfort, so that you can enjoy yourself. Like, I don't know, have you guys heard REI's interpretation now of trying to break fun down into 3 types? I find that very interesting.
No, I have not heard this. REI, like the adventure company, the adventure gear company.
Yeah, I kept getting interviewed about it because I think the blog post was popular for a hot minute. So it's really interesting. So because it's a completely different model than one that I would use, although you could argue. Let me get into it and then we'll unpack it. So they call type 1 fun anything that's fun in the moment. So if you're having fun and you're enjoying it in the moment, that's type 1. Type 2 are things that are challenging. So in the moment, right, like that experience I shared at the Great Barrier Reef, I was not really having that much fun because I was a little bit scared, but in the telling, right, you see the big old smile on my face. Like in the telling, you absolutely had fun, right? And I would imagine, cliff jumping is another one, right? In that moment, it's so exhilarating and perhaps sensory overload. You wouldn't call it fun in that moment, but in the retelling, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And then type 3, which I just find ridiculous, I've gone on record as saying so, are things that are not fun. And whenever you look back at them, you never consider them fun. I'm like, how do you even call that fun?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. That's not a fun type. That's like, sounds like torture to me.
Yeah, but I think for the REI crowd, it makes sense, right? They're trying to say, like, what are the things that you do that you just enjoy? What are the things where you pushed yourself? And you're glad you did, and then what are like the hikes or the mountaineering that you did that you're like, that's awful, I never want to do it again. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
almost like my agonizing quadrant, right? So like they just cut it up a little bit different, but
it's true.
I think type 2 fun, using theirs, which is essentially, a form of edge work, makes sense, right? There are a lot of things that we do that are really the things that build us resilience. And like in the book, I talk about it, and the reason for that is that when those things are kind of scary, our brain dilates time a little bit. And so we encode more sensory data, right? We tend to remember the smells. We tend to have more vivid pictures of what that was. And there's some neurochemical reasons for that, because when we feel like we're potentially going to be put in harm's way, we want to remember that to feel safe the next time. But when it's done for fun's sake, right? Like then it's just one of those things we can look back at and be like, that was bananas, like that's crazy that I did it. And then if it leads to mastery, even better, right? Like, as we explore crazier dives or feel, a better sense of mastery to do a harder cave, or like for me, I really enjoyed wreck dives. So it was, kind of progressing to be able to do crazier and crazier wrecks, which are dangerous. I remember cutting my wetsuit on one, and obviously once you start to bleed in unknown waters, it's a little.
Yeah, it's time to end that dive, bud.
Yeah. So that's why it's important. There's a whole host. One, it pushes you. Two, it can lead to mastery, which is always fun. I think for most people, they want to be able to get better at, this hard thing, right? And then last, it really creates these enriched memories with, encoded sensory information, which we know when we look back at our life, those are the moments, right? Those are the things, whether it's edge work or not, like having those types of memories, we know not is just a good thing. Like, for folks that are familiar with Bronnie Ware's work, the 5 regrets of the dying, like it's one, adds to a life well lived, but two, we know that it adds neuroplasticity. Like those things that are sort of novel, we call it a tapestry of life, really does build resilience and builds cognitive reserve. So there's like both the feel good element of it, right? Going towards a path of mastery, but then two, there's clear physiological and psychological benefits, because those things allow us to look back at our life and go, wow, I lived a pretty cool life.
Yeah, I feel like I can tie this entire conversation back to scuba diving. Even some divers can't just get the open water certification, then they got to go for the advanced and then the rescue. And then, I think, Sarah, are you a dive master? You're a rescue diver, I think, right? Yeah. But LC is an instructor. I mean, you take that skill and you build upon it, and maybe it's not as scary as it was when you first started, but being in the pool with a brand new diver and seeing their eyes light up the first time they get to breathe underwater, or going to the deep end and they feel the pressure for the first time, like, oh, I need to equalize, or, or they, you can almost experience that adrenaline rush again through them. So I think I don't know if that's empathy or what it is, but it works. It keeps that thrill alive.
Yeah.
Is that why you like teaching?
I love it.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
No, but I think that is right. We're still sort of figuring that out, but I just had an amazing conversation last week with Paul Zach. And for folks unfamiliar with him, he's really studied a lot of the oxytocin research. And so I think when you see that, when you know that like what they're in store, like all the enjoyment that they're going to get, there's a deeper connection than just kind of, pleasure or excitement, right? It's like, call it empathy, call it connection, whatever it is, it's something special. And that stuff really just makes us feel better. Like, and it has a lasting effect. It's not just in the moment, right?
Yeah. So, Mike, how hard was it to write a book?
It was intense, especially writing a book about fun during the pandemic, because I sold it right before the pandemic. And then, as I confess in the book, I ended up getting COVID and was knocked out for about 8 months. Luckily, I've the only lasting effect I have now is some minor neuropathy that I'm dealing with, but I didn't know that I was going to be able to finish it. So
wow.
It was neat to use some of the principles of the book to like not get too down and know, that even, these pits of despair are temporary. And but but anybody that has a story to tell, I would encourage them to do it. It's really is a interesting process to be able to, get your ideas out and then refine them. And then connect with just amazing people, especially if it's, a nonfiction book where you have an affinity for the topic. I've been so loving the journey, just keep meeting so many amazing people and getting to have these conversations. It's been a real joy.
That's really cool. We are trying to write a book. It's been in the process for a year now, and we've not even sent anything off to publishers yet, but we're getting there.
Oh, man, LC just did a bunch of work on it though, and all we have to do, Tracy and I, is just like read it.
But I'm curious because we have our steps for how to explore outside your comfort zone through what we've learned through the podcast, and that's the story that we want to tell. But what was more challenging for you, coming up with a fun habit and having your story, or putting that into words on a book and working with a publisher?
Yeah, I think so. This was a labor of love coming out of my doctoral work. So I had, what do they call it? I was antsy and wanted to keep writing. So I wrote the first manuscript, and this was before COVID, and it was essentially just another literature review for folks that aren't in academia. Essentially, it was just a bunch of regurgitated science, right? And so no one would have ever read it. And so I think for me, being an academic writer, the challenge was, breathing life into it, being vulnerable and sharing some of my stories, for better or worse. And like I said, some folks are, exactly what I was afraid of is happening, right? They're critical of my stories. I'm like, wow, there's still a person that wrote this book. Like,
right.
This wasn't Chat GTP, man.
Yeah.
This was Mike Rucker.
No, but it's funny because like most of them are legit. Like it's actually, I think because I was really coached well and I braced for it, because if you read the Goodread critical reviews, it's like, yeah, the book was interesting, but this guy really seems like a dork. And I'm like, you know what? That's right. It kind of
That's a good assessment.
Yeah. And then one said, I was really annoyed about how much he enjoys spending time with his kids. So I'm like,
what?
Okay. Like, well, I guess I deserve that.
All right, then.
Gosh.
What a terrible person you are, Mike.
Yeah. And then some people are critical of, I share my views. I'm certainly not an atheist, but I'm agnostic. And some people took issue with, some of the parallels I drew with Patton Oswalt at the end, kind of, folks that are still just trying to figure it all out, like how dare this guy not have it figured out? God is the answer. And that's good for them. I don't have, but I like to be, so I was like, wow, okay, that, like I was trying to be open-minded. You're not. That's right. So that it's that kind of stuff. I think for me to answer your question, like that was the scary part, and none of it was untrue. The things I was scared of happened, but like, wow, it just didn't matter, especially because you're going to connect with people that you want to. And that's a learned skill, right? I remember when I first started out, and maybe some of you can relate, maybe not, but like my wife would laugh at me, like, when we're trying to build our audience, and this was 10 years ago, right? And I'd had like 400 subscribers that were essentially family and friends. And I would get the analytics that would say, 250 people opened it, which is sort of amazing, right? And then, but I would sit and complain to my wife about the 2 people that unsubscribed, like, what's wrong with you? First of all, you're the one that decided to start this. Like you don't have a boss. You could just quit tomorrow, So yeah, but I can't wait to see what you guys have in store. This has been a fun journey, especially, watching you guys on your social channels, just the tribe that you guys are bringing together. And it's clear your guys' message is resonating with a lot of folks.
Thank you. We keep begging people to leave reviews at the end of our shows, and I'm sure there's a way to like go on and read them. I haven't seen any reviews. I don't think I'm braced for the negative ones yet. I don't think I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I got coached multiple times, because I think if I didn't hear it from, trusted friends and more than once. So hopefully I'm the first one, it's like, then it would have hurt. But because I've let it hurt and I know how stupid that is. And I even talk about it in the book, right? It's literally an army of nothing. Like, of course you want it to resonate with folks, but because it has, right? Like, I've gotten some really endearing personal messages about how it's changed their life. The ones that are where you can tell maybe they didn't even read the book, they just like,
right.
Or it just didn't resonate, which is fair. Like I'm not, I don't have enough hubris to think that I'm going to meet everyone where they are,
Yeah, we're not for everyone.
Yeah. Or you and me, right? Like, I think that is a broad base. I think we're agreed.
Like, do you remember the days when it's like, if you don't have anything nice, don't say it at all? Because I bet most of these people that are saying negative things are online, and it's like, obviously they're not happy, and they're saying things to bring other people down, and that's unfortunate.
Well, I'll put the spotlight on me. I had no idea we were going to go in this direction, but it's good.
You just never know what rabbit hole we're going to
go.
and
exactly.
This could be like long game edge work if you think about it, right? I mean, again,
that's a good point.
We're really stretching the definition, but
I mean, we are voluntarily putting ourselves out there, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that sometimes I'll forget, like when I do notice it might be affecting me, is that they're talking about the book, the product, like, with the very few exceptions. Again, someone called me a dork. Like, it's like the book just didn't hit. That's fine. Like, there are plenty of movies that are just different pieces of art where I have different tastes, and so. But be prepared for that. It's part of the journey.
My husband told me when we first started this journey, and I told him what it was going to be about, like what we were doing, and he knows me, and he knows that I will cry at somebody saying, just, I don't like that shirt you're wearing, because that's who I am as a person. But he was basically like, people on the internet are assholes. I'm just telling you that right now. Just be prepared. And I was just like, well, what do you mean? And he's just like, you're going to come to me at some point because somebody is going to have said something negative online, and just people on the internet are assholes. So
well, in general, people on the internet are assholes and cowards because they're doing it from a keyboard behind a screen. You don't even see them. It's very different than actually being in front of somebody and offering some criticism. They're all just cowards, basically.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth it to put up with that a little bit, because the message that we have to give people and the message that Mike's giving people with the fun habit, I mean, those are really important things that people need to hear, and it might bring somebody out of a dark period. So if I got to put up with some asshole on the internet for a little bit, then it's worth it.
That's fine.
You know what? You should figure out one, and then you guys could like present it to each other. Like, figure out the one that feels like they can handle it the best, and then just be like, here it is. And then
I think that's TC is going to put up with it the best.
I do too, for sure. So
yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and nope right out of that job.
Yeah. So, Mike, do you have a favorite positive review or success story that you've heard from someone who's read your book?
Yeah, one is really standing out as like lately. Well, there's two cool things. So let me. So I'll answer the question and I'll tell you something really cool that just happened. So the review was it was somebody who had picked up the book but knew that their sibling was a physician that was like had just like, it mirrored the story that I share in chapter 3. They had a colleague that unfortunately had completed suicide, and it was really taking a toll on her. But her defense mechanism was to just work more. And he's like, look, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. And she relented and finally started reading it, and then sent him this just really endearing message how the book had changed her trajectory. And then he shared me her text messages. And And like, that's what it's all about, like the fact that she's now going to recover. Again, my academic work was in physician burnout, so that has a special spot in my heart. This year, it's the highest rate they've ever seen, at 63% of physicians reporting being burnt out,
Wow.
and we need them more than ever, right, with everything that's going on. So that one meant a lot. And then I don't know if you guys remember the bit about Judy, going back to fun at work. So she's my dental hygienist.
Yeah.
And People magazine found out about her story and gave her a half page in the People coming out next week. So
Well, that's fun.
yeah, she's so humble. So, she's an introvert. So this was like really performance art for her, right? But it's not like I think that was sort of the specialness of her. She never wanted accolades or anything, never, it was just a way for her to comfort people in a situation that's pretty much known as like one of the worst things that people have to do, right? And like, so much so, as I wrote in the book, that she was able to reduce the amount of drugs people needed to feel at ease within the dentist office. And she ended up retiring, but they still did the piece on her. And so the fact that she's getting celebrated, it's really, lightened, like given her, this kind of 15 minutes that she's really enjoying that wouldn't have otherwise happened. That's really made me happy too.
So is there anybody at the office who's going to sort of take over that role of?
No, that's the thing. I think that's, it's one of the tenets in the book, right? It's like, you really need to own it. And especially here in the US, like, going on this book tour, the social norms are just so entrenched, right? Whether we're just talking about leisure and fun to anyone kind of acting outside of the norm, even though it's so helpful because everyone in that office knows it is, but they still look at it as goofy, right?
Yeah.
And so no one's going to pick up the baton, as it were, which is unfortunate. But I think her story is making an impact where people now feel more empowered to do that type of work. And so that part makes me happy. But these are the exceptions, not the rule, right? And like, obviously you're not telling an accountant to wear a silly hat or whatever. Like, that's what, like, people always go to the extremes too, right? I think
Right.
the book's more about balance. It's not like, going to Burning Man every year, right? Like, so that's what's funny too, is like, for whatever reason, I think we always think in absolutes now too, whether that's politics or whatever the reason, it's always, you always have to pick a side instead of, again, that empathy, meeting in the middle, finding where the connection is, which is so important for us all feeling well, And so again, I guess to kind of wrap it back to edge work, I think that's another one of its really key components, is that connection, right? When you are doing something that you have voluntarily sort of said, okay, I get it that it's a little risky, but I know that it could potentially have a big reward, usually feel connected to that activity too, right? And you guys have already kind of written a love letter for scuba diving, right? And so I think it is a love affair. Like, ballet dancers, often, and it's only because I read the study, but I'm sure it's across the board with different vocations and hobbies that, do require operating at that high of a level. They talk about it as a love affair. And I think, that's because it truly is,
Not to circle back to the negative, which maybe you should go first, Elsie, but as a physician, I can definitely speak to the level of burnout that myself and my partners and other specialties at the hospital where I am. I mean, it is rampant. And I do think that contributes significantly to the fact that I do not find joy in my job anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the data. I think we got into it a little bit the last episode. It just becomes a downward spiral, right? And to some degree, it's just a weird world that we're, once empathy on both sides starts to fray, then patient outcomes start to falter by correlation, right? And then, then you don't feel good about your work, and it's just the state that we're in. And there's so many headwinds, and I don't want to get us off the rails, right? But like, again, I think it's just, how many patients you have to see per hour, the fact that EMRs essentially gave you more work to do with the same amount of time, and like those are just two of the major factors, right? Like I have so much, Sarah, empathy for you and just for what physicians are going through right now. I mean, it's clearly like at crisis, right? So it's unfortunate.
It's pretty bad when referring to EMR specifically. It's pretty bad when you actually have committees that get together to figure out how to decrease the number of keystrokes a physician has to hit to complete given tasks.
What's EMR?
Electronic medical record.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
So theoretically a lot easier, right, than handwriting everything. And plus, physicians, as brilliant as we all are, our handwriting is not always the best. So EMR was supposed to really help with that, make everything legible, make everything there and visible medical legally, but there just has not been the correct platform to do that without creating a lot of additional work for the physicians and all providers. It's not just the physicians, it's nurses, mid-level providers, everybody.
And for better or worse, it opened up a communication channel with patients, which obviously patients love, but then physicians weren't compensated for all that extra work, because now essentially if we have additional questions, we feel entitled to ask them. And I mean, that should be good for the patient physician relationship, right? But physicians a lot of times aren't getting compensated for that work. So think if any of us were essentially told, okay, well, now you get to work 15% more, but we're not going to compensate you for that, where physicians are already working 50 to 60 hours a week. I mean, and again, that's just one of the things they're dealing with right now. We won't even get into Press Ganey because I know we're running out of time, but like, anyways, sorry.
Well, I brought it up, so sorry.
No, but I think it goes to, you have folks like Dyke Drummond. There are physicians that are escaping, or not escaping, that's the wrong, but are trying to help, like trying to figure out, even this isn't really in the realm of fun, but something as simple as a scribe, right? I mean, we know, it's a fairly low cost, and it really takes a lot of the burden off physicians. Like the things that we can do, but for whatever reason, like let's just talk about it in broader terms, right? Like I have been unpacking, maybe this is the next book, and this isn't necessarily fun, but it applies to leisure. Like we're second to last within the developed world with regards to even giving people access to leisure, right? 10 days off per 1 year's worth of work. There's one country below us, Micronesia, at 9 days per 1 year's worth of work, right? I mean, we are literally rock bottom. And we've kind of, because of, we've been sold this idea that self-worth is tied to productivity. For some reason, we believe if that's okay, because if we just work a little bit more, somehow all of it's going to work out. But we have the data now. We know that it doesn't work out. In fact, it's not just physicians, it's people across the board are so depleted, have no resilience left because they're not having fun. They're not taking time off the table for themselves. They're losing the ability to make connections. That we have all of these physiological and psychological poor outcomes, and you can't draw a straight line, but I feel like the dotted line is pretty thick at this point. We took a dark turn, but
I know.
I hope what you hear from that is go out and have some fun.
Having a scribe for your EMR is a bit like getting a babysitter to do bath time, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's exactly right.
Oh, yeah.
And that was another criticism. Again, like this is good because we'll go back to laughing, but someone was like, called me entitled. Like, again, like the whole thing was like, we couldn't afford a nanny. And they're like, the fact that he doesn't find joy in giving his kids baths just says everything about him.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
I know. That's exactly what I thought. I heard that and I was like, oh, brilliant.
I was like, that's genius.
So Mark and I, we have a set date night every week, but we're both divorced parents and our ex-partners have our kids half the time. So Tuesday night, we're both kid-free. That's date night. And that is so super important to us. If we lived together and were raising kids together and had them every night, when would we possibly fit that in unless you hire somebody to come take over parent time for you? That's brilliant.
Yeah. And that's another win. I think, I mean, I've only heard it a couple of times, so I can't say it's like pervasive, but like, oh, I didn't think, we love our neighbors, and I never thought to trade, childcare time. And like, so again, only heard it a couple of times, but like, that's big, right? Because I know for us, at $80 extra a night, that kind of puts a burden, it makes us do it less. And so now that we're doing, some childcare sharing, that frees up more money to do some cool stuff, right? And so it's not just for people, that come from a place of privilege. I mean, there are ways to get creative.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, that's good, because that was funny. That was another. You guys will, and I think I've shared like the 3 worst, so that's good. Like, they don't get worse than that. So if you can handle those, you'll be fine. Well, I can't wait to help you guys elevate that book. Like, again, I love the journey you guys are on, and I'm glad that I get to be a guest, on the voyage. And so I'm excited for you guys. Have you already broke the news? I did listen to a couple podcasts to get ready, but I don't remember hearing about the book.
Yeah, it's not something that we talk about regularly.
Okay.
But it is something it's like been on our vision boards the last couple of years, that kind of thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know. Well, let me know how I can support, for sure.
We will.
We'll definitely pick your brain.
All right.
So
man, I have so many questions we didn't even get to.
I know. I'm looking at this list like, man, there are like 12 questions we didn't even ask.
I know.
So
that's all right.
But we are coming up on an hour. That's right. So Mike, this is something new since you joined us last. We are asking all of our guests now, what gets you out of your comfort zone and excited to explore?
Well, we talked about it the whole episode. But I will share like something a little existential, because I really have been playing, like, in no way do I think we're living in the Matrix at all, but I have been fascinated by
Same.
Well, I'll tell you where, like, the Venn diagram for me is that I read the book Sapiens. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a really interesting book, and it essentially goes through the history of how we we evolved from being hunter-gatherers, right? And essentially it's because everything was made up, right? So whether you believe we're in the Matrix or not, like, money is essentially created by us, right? Like, it's not a real thing. We just agreed, we have the social agreement that it is. Government isn't a real thing. Corporations aren't a real thing. We've essentially made it up and created these systems. And even if you do prescribe to a religion, again, I'm not knocking on anyone's religion, but that means there's at least 300 other ones out there that were made up by somebody. And so all of these things that kind of dictate how we operate were made up by us. And so, like, how can you figure out what the rules are and potentially manipulate them? And there's some discomfort in that, right? Because again, then you start to overthink it, and you do get close to, maybe we are in the Matrix. Right? So I don't know if that's the most discreet answer, but it's been scaring me, because like, you think about it too much, right? And you're like, but then the fun side, again, kind of relating it back to edge work, is you're like, okay, wait, if I understand the rules intimately, then I can start to bend some of them, and make the world a place, even if it's more the micro world than the macro world, right? The micro world that I live in, I can make it a place that is enjoyable for me. And then, because I think what that does is it relinquishes some of the burdens of thinking that you have to change the macro world. I talk about that a little bit in the book too, right? Like, these huge impactful change makers realize that if they take on too much, again, they'll burn out, right? There's no way to change the macro world, but you can make your dent in the universe. And so that's where I've been really having, challenging myself, like, to what degree can I sort of bend things to my will and make my own world, live in my own matrix. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Maybe I do believe in the Matrix. Got it out of me. I didn't want to go on record.
That's amazing. Well, we have a challenge for our listeners this week. We'd like you to think about the type of edge work you enjoy. And, that's the type of play that involves taking voluntary risks just to experience the thrill of it. Then we want you to go do it and let us know how it goes by using the hashtag Siren Soapbox on all the social medias. Mike?
However, Siren Soapbox is not responsible for any injuries.
Yeah, right. We have to have our jackass disclaimer.
That's right.
Do not send in videos. We will not watch them.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. I blog at michaelrucker.com, and if you're interested in the fun habits, available wherever you enjoy buying books,
including the Miami airport.
Including the Miami airport.
Apparently it's in every airport, which is amazing.
That is so fun.
Yeah,
That's
I think
awesome.
it's the cover.
It is a beautiful cover. It makes me happy.
Well, Sirens, thank you so much for playing with us tonight. And thank you, fellow explorers, for listening to this episode. We'll have a link in the description to Mike's website. And we will also put a link to buy us a coffee in case you want to support the Sirens in that way. Of course, you're listening to this episode as support enough. Thanks again for listening. And make sure you rate and review us wherever you're listening to podcasts. And until next time, dive in, stay curious, and be happy. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Siren Soapbox, and a special thank you to C Strings for providing our music. Snag their latest EP from iTunes today. Follow the Sirens on all the social medias, and don't forget to tell your friends about us. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll catch you next time on another episode of Siren Soapbox.